What's up, everyone? It is 3 p.m. on a Sunday afternoon. Thanks for tuning in for our Sunday edition of Cannabis Legalization News. Today, we're joined by Patrick Nightingale out of Pennsylvania. We're going to get into Pennsylvania's cannabis laws and legislature. So let's just get right into it. What's going on, everyone?
Hey. Hi, Lauren.
Hey.
Hi, Miggy. Hi, Patrick. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great. I just wanted to start off with Miggy doing that. He stopped on yesterday and he did a piece about the Black Lives Matter and also its relation to the drug war. And I thought it was really, really good. But then I was just worried while he was doing it that, oh boy, this is going to get taken down because of how Donald Trump came and he said that, he's going to strip away Twitter's rights to be able to fact check them. So I'm always worried that, are we going to get somewhat censored by those types of executive orders? But then also what Miggy was talking about was emotional. And so because of that, I'm like, well, is that going to violate terms of service? I tried to put disclaimers and warnings and prophylactics on the actual thing. And I thought what Miggy was talking about was like really legitimate. So, Miggy, that was a pretty powerful little piece that you did on the drug war and how it's systematic racism.
Thank you, man. Just don't want to die.
Yeah. Well, you do look menacing with the black mask on, but if you could show everybody your normal face or your new face.
Well, I don't want to show them the three chins, but
you don't want to show them the three chins. Look at that. Look how young you look after you've shaved.
It's amazing though. Like the beard just covers so much, and I look like an adult. So yeah, we're gonna go with this for a while. But really, Patrick, thanks for joining us. Being a federal freaking attorney is going to be great to ask you some questions, especially like with the social media thing. We've had the cannabis shadow ban for a couple of years at least now.
Oh, we got caught in 2013-14. So like that was after I had written. Always use the best English. So I'd written that book in 2010, and that's when I found you, Miggy. Back in MySpace days. And then I made you an admin on our Facebook page. It's down there. You can find it at Free THC on Facebook. You have to go to facebook.com/freethc because of the shadow ban. But you started sharing some pretty dank memes in 2013. And then it started to go viral and blow up until it was caught. And then it's still the 15th largest cannabis page on Facebook. It's just that you can't promote cannabis on the internet.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. You type in the words marijuana in the search engine, and amazingly, no one has posted anything about marijuana, cannabis, or weed ever.
Yeah, isn't that hilarious?
What are your thoughts on that, Patrick, as far as the new Trump decree?
Yeah.
What concerns me is that we're kind of in a wild west right now with a president and a significant, core base of followers that will accept, maybe it's necessary right now to, scale back some First Amendment protections because, we're being told that, our voices aren't being adequately represented in, companies that are privately owned and not, government run or regulated. I think it's chilling the way that in difficult times and in times of anxiety and emergency like we're dealing with right now during the pandemic, or like we dealt with after the tragedy of 9/11, how willing people are to accept fundamental intrusions on their basic, civil liberties, fundamental intrusions or restrictions on the Bill of Rights. And I don't want to see us in a situation where, because of partisan politics or because of just overall, concern and anxiety, where people are willing to say, okay, I can understand the need to surrender some of my First Amendment protections, some of my First Amendment rights, because we are in difficult times right now. I'm confident that organizations like the ACLU will stand strong and tall and fight this in the courts. I am hopeful that the Supreme Court is not infused with partisanship, at least on First Amendment issues, whereas it might be on right to privacy issues. And I'm hopeful that if the president persists on attempting to restrict free speech via social media, that litigation will ensue, and that firm Supreme Court precedents will come out and say, no, you cannot do this. It is a violation of the First Amendment.
That would be fantastic. But then it goes back to the unconstitutionality of the cannabis laws. You can have bad law on the books for decades. So what is your practice area in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, I'm primarily a criminal defense attorney. I'm a former prosecutor. I was with the Allegheny County District Attorney's Office from 1996 to 2002. I was a founder of our domestic violence prosecution unit. And since entering private practice, I've been able to add my voice to cannabis legalization, to cannabis reform here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. I also have a separate practice, Cannabis Legal Solutions, where myself and my partners are offering business legal services and other legal services for Pennsylvania's emerging cannabis industry. But as we'll talk about, I'm sure a little bit further on in our discussion today, in terms of a growing industry, Pennsylvania is still very, very small because we are limited to a very small number of players in our medical marijuana marketplace. We've got a limited number of licenses. There are a limited number of license holders. So we haven't really seen our cannabis industry fully blossom, fully grow, fully flower. Sorry for the pun, but
it is the cannabis industry, but that sounds very similar to Illinois' structure of the medical laws. So there wasn't a lot of movement at all in Illinois until 2019, after they 1 year ago today, the Illinois legislature voted to legalize cannabis. And that really changed the game. And so when they start the medical states, they usually start fairly small, and then there's not a lot of movement in the players afterwards. Why don't you bring us up to speed on the distinctions of the medical game and the licensings that is available in Pennsylvania's medical? Do they call it medical marijuana, or do they call it medical cannabis?
It's our medical marijuana law. In fact, one of our full adult use legalization laws would change it from marijuana to cannabis. But that bill was introduced, and because it purported to amend our medical cannabis or our medical marijuana law, it got stuck in our health committee, run by basically Harry Anslinger, acolyte, who said that she voted against medical marijuana on religious grounds. So,
good. That's what you want for your public servants. You want Jesus. It's like, hey, First Amendment right, separation of church and state. No, indoctrination of church and state. One nation under God. Remember that.
Well, here in Pennsylvania, marijuana, cannabis remains Schedule I under Pennsylvania law. Possession of up to 30 grams is a misdemeanor offense, but it's called possession of a small amount of marijuana and is the least serious misdemeanor offense in Pennsylvania's crimes code. Cultivating, one plant is a felony in Pennsylvania, but fortunately, we no longer have mandatory minimum sentences for plant count or for weight. And under Pennsylvania's sentencing guidelines, marijuana is not graded nearly as heavy as more other Schedule I controlled substances, such as heroin, or even Schedule II, such as cocaine and methamphetamine. We do have a medical marijuana law, which consists. It was passed in 2016, signed by our governor, Governor Wolf, on April 16th of 2016. The very first medical cannabis products that were available in Pennsylvania were available on February 15th of 2018. And I'm proud to say I was the very first medical patient in Pennsylvania to purchase a medical marijuana product.
Nice.
Yay. What type of product? Do they have a flower ban?
No. When the law was first passed, the law prohibited smoking, and it limited medical marijuana products to oils, pills, tinctures, topicals, or a form that could be vaporized or nebulized. And the Republican who was championing the bill took me aside in Harrisburg and said, listen, we left a back door. This is a back door to allowing the Department of Health to authorize or permit flower. And the first time that the advisory board was presented with the opportunity, they did that. Nice. So we were only non-flower for about 6 months. And I think, anecdotally speaking, flower probably makes up about 50% of our medical cannabis sales.
Nice.
Our program, one of the unfortunate things about our program is the products are extremely expensive, probably twice the black market, if not a little more so. And
how much is an eighth?
65 to 80, depending on the quality.
65 for cookie cut here in Illinois, but then you can get an eighth for 49. Miggy, what's the cheapest eighth you can get over in Seattle?
Well, I found them for like 20, but they're garbage.
Yeah, but that's like a loss leader. That's why you like light up greenhouses. They're like, all right, this is your $25 a bag eighth.
Yeah, and it's like a bag of nugget or popcorn shit or whatever shake. You know, it's nothing quality. We still pay $65 apes though. I mean, that's the high end stuff.
Nice. Well, that's pretty cool that the market is somewhat solidifying because, we're talking 3 different states and ballpark kind of the same number.
Yeah.
That's interesting to hear that's the numbers coming out of Seattle because, our program here in Pennsylvania, it's not quite a monopoly, but it's a very, very small, near monopoly marketplace.
How many numbers the licenses?
25 grower processor licenses.
Oh,
those
geez.
are integrated. So if you're cultivating, you're processing, and 50 dispensary licenses, each license holder can open up to 3 storefronts. And separate from that, we have a clinical research program where 8 hospitals or 8 university medical programs can partner with a vertically integrated license holder. And those vertically integrated license holders, I believe, can have up to 6 dispensaries per license. So there's a potential for an additional 8 cultivation and processing facilities and an additional 48 dispensaries, but those would be tied into the research program with the research hospitals or universities.
Wow.
And go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, I was going to ask you, as a criminal, because you're involved in the criminal side of things, as defending, and you're in a medical state. Do you find a lot of people still being prosecuted for cannabis type stuff in Pennsylvania?
Yes. In Pennsylvania, outside of Pittsburgh and outside of Philadelphia, we typically have smaller communities, maybe not rural or farming communities, but certainly not big cities, certainly not places where police have better things to do. And even with decriminalization in Philadelphia, which affects close to 4,000 Philadelphians annually, we still have close to 20,000 Pennsylvanians being prosecuted for possession of a small amount. And if you're not in Pittsburgh, if you're not in Philadelphia, you're probably facing conviction or being forced to use an alternative disposition. And one of the things that small counties around here really like to do is jam you on paraphernalia, because that baggie that your weed is in can get you up to 12 months of probation supervision. That means there's money flowing into those probation departments. That means those probation officers have the ability to violate you. That means those judges have the ability to incarcerate you. I recently consulted with a medical cannabis patient in a county where the judge does not permit medical cannabis use. And this poor guy went to jail for 5 months on a probation violation for for something that the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania allows him to do.
See, wow. The reason why I asked, and make it more depressing because I'm the depressing guy, as we were talking, get ready to talk to Patrick in Pennsylvania, and then all the shit that's been happening with, since George Floyd's death and the last stream I did for you guys. This is frustrating because in the medical states, they're still prosecuting what's inevitably is going to be recreational. If law enforcement and everybody else could just get on the same, same eye level, we would have less incidents like with the George Floyds or, people being shot, period.
Yeah, but you always hear one of the biggest impediments to legalization is law enforcement, because it's how they make their money.
Yeah.
And not only that, it was one of the pieces that you went on yesterday when the guy was stepping on his neck, and you said, you got the article that mentioned that another one of the officers loitering while that guy was doing that said, "Don't do drugs, kids."
What the fuck's that shit? It's that premeditated.
Yeah, don't do drugs, kids. But that's what you always hear this, because we do this show all the time. And so it's just a common refrain that you have to have it be illegal so that we can search them to find something else that's a worse crime. And they just don't get that it's causing these types of problems. And then that's one of the things with Illinois, how they have structured their adult use cannabis to focus on these communities that were most disproportionately impacted and to force you to partner with them to be able to be in competition or contention to win one of these competitive licenses. If you don't have social equity in Illinois, you're not going to win an adult use license. And so if other states, Minnesota, for example, they have a bill, that bill needs to be reworked to address these social equity concerns. I'm not sure if Pennsylvania's adult use bills that have been proposed, what type of stripe or variety they have of social equity. But with the way that Illinois has done it, they require it to get points, so that they inject it into the actual the competitive application scoring process. You're not going to win unless you have it. But then also they have this R3 collective: restore, reinvest, reinvigorate, something like that, with the 3 R's. And they look at all these disproportionately impacted areas, and they see how they can put money back into them so that they can fix the problems of this drug war. And they've been the problems of the drug war have been just so linked to systematic racism over the decades. I mean, that's like literally where the stuff came from. I mean, and then Miggy and I were talking to a guy from South Africa. Same thing happened there in the 20s. It's crazy.
Yeah.
We're fortunate, in Pennsylvania, the authors of one of the House adult use bills and the Senate adult use bill, Black legislators from Pittsburgh and from Philadelphia, who are very aware of the harm of the war on drugs, who are very aware of the impact that it has had on their communities. And those type of social equity components are part of the legislation. How that survives, if we can actually get into a hearing and start going through the process in Harrisburg with the Republican majority, we'll see how it all plays out. But I do know that our bill sponsors are very, very passionate about social equity, about restorative justice, and about making sure that all Pennsylvanians have a chance to take advantage of this if we're able to bring this to Pennsylvania. A couple of things that I wanted to follow up on, Miggy, that you were talking about. Pittsburgh passed a decriminalization ordinance. It's not very widely used, but some of our officers understand that heavy-handed cannabis enforcement has really contributed to some of the breakdown in community relations, especially in some of our Black communities. And though we haven't seen the decriminalization bill widely used, when I tracked the numbers, I saw that it was where it was being used was in communities where we had lower income Black communities. 200 times it had been used, primarily in neighborhoods where otherwise marijuana prohibition was used as that weapon in order to get the search, in order to get inside the car, in order to search the kids, see if there's a firearm, see if there's a brick of heroin, see if anyone has warrants and that type of thing. So slowly but surely, I believe that our police department is trying to retrain their officers a little bit to say, listen, if you don't have to do it, here's an option, so that you're not dragging someone into the criminal justice system unnecessarily.
Exactly. It's the reason why I've been doing this whole thing. Is I just don't want to get shot. I don't want to be treated as an evil person in the wrong state as an American. This is just nonsense.
I mean, I don't like being labeled by Jeff Sessions as a bad person in like 2018. I mean, it's not like this is 30 years ago, 50 years ago, but I mean, like, they still perpetuate this. Same with Mike Crapo in the Senate. Crapo is how it's actually pronounced. But he's the one who he stymied the Safe Banking Act back in September, and so I'm not sure if we're going to have another SARS to COVID stimulus bill or what. But the most recent incantation of the one that the Democratic Congress put forward and it passed is now in the House, and it does include the Safe Banking Act. But I just don't know if it's going to get out.
Yeah, I personally don't see that getting through the Senate. But no. Here we are.
Well, I want to focus on the future for Pennsylvania. Let's talk all about how we can get a dispensary license in Pennsylvania in the not too distant future, Patrick. Are you pretty familiar with the bills that are floating around in the Pennsylvania legislature?
Yes, I am. Right now, the Pennsylvania medical marijuana market is closed. All 50 licenses have been awarded. All 25 grower processor licenses have been awarded, but one has been revoked. That's the subject of litigation right now. And what I read from the Department of Health is that license will be made available in a phase 3 application process. The two bills that I like, we've got two competing bills. Here in Pennsylvania, we have a state store system of distributing alcoholic beverages. Mm-hmm. If you want to purchase liquor, if you want to purchase wine, you're going through a state store. And Republicans in Pennsylvania have long wanted to privatize our state store system. So some are talking about a grand bargain where we privatize the state store system, but then the state takes over distribution of retail cannabis. Essentially, the state becomes the dispensary. I personally don't care for that. I don't think the state store system works very well, and I certainly don't want the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania now setting the prices for my cannabis. The other bills, House Bill 2050 and Senate Bill 350, would not utilize the state store system. Senate Bill 350 would provide an unlimited number of licenses. Let the market decide. But what Senate Bill 350 also does is it would provide for tiered licenses so that small farmers, small businesses would not get squeezed out by, the likes of, you're from Chicago, Cresco Labs. My wife is, the community outreach coordinator for Cresco here in Pittsburgh. So, I understand that it is a major corporate cannabis entity. And if it could, it would be happy to dominate the marketplace.
Oh, yeah.
And our bill sponsors understand that. They know that. They know that, Cresco and Harvest and whomever have a role to play in large-scale cannabis cultivation. But they also know that, the medical system, kind of cut out, small businesses. They cut out the small Pennsylvania farmer, and that's being something that is a key component in Senate Bill 350 and House Bill 2050.
Awesome. So with these bills that are in Pennsylvania for the adult use cannabis, for the dispensary license, do they have any restrictions on the number of dispensary licenses that will be awarded, or like the number that I can have? Can I get like 100 dispensary licenses, or how is that setting up?
Under Senate Bill 350, there's no restriction to the number of licenses that would be available, but the bill doesn't specifically speak to whether or not a large corporate cannabis entity would be restricted specifically on the number of licenses. I am quite sure that that would be language coming forward. In House Bill 2050, it artificially caps the number of licenses available at 300. And I think that that was just a placeholder, as that bill would be further developed if it was able to go through the committee hearing process. But both prime sponsors are aware that they don't want to simply create a monopoly for large cannabis, but put a system in place that benefits all Pennsylvanians, and to make sure that, hey, we've got 12.5 million people in Pennsylvania, perhaps up to 2 million adult use consumers. So we've got to be able to supply that demand as well.
Oh, yeah.
Well, since we're going to talk about supply and demand, then we can switch the conversation from the retail side to, all right, let's talk about the different types of marijuana grow licenses that are available under SB 350. So you mentioned that the legislative bill striates the number of, or in tiers, the number of, or the size of the cultivation facilities. So I know that they start with a micro grower. What's a micro grower facility under SB 350?
100 plants or less.
Yeah, that is a micro grow. And then do they have restrictions on how they can grow those 100 plants?
Not in the bill itself. It doesn't go into that level of regulatory detail.
What are the requirements, Patrick? And I'm always curious, for each state, for licenses, do you have to be a state resident?
In Pennsylvania, you do not. There was no residency restriction whatsoever. I was actually on a team that made application for licenses in West Virginia, and West Virginia had a residency requirement, and then that got struck down by West Virginia Supreme Court. Wow. So, we have no residency restrictions. However, what I'm hoping is that, as these bills move forward, and as we have a realistic discussion, let's have some incentives built in that will benefit Pennsylvanians, that will benefit those with Pennsylvania partners. What we saw with our medical licensing is that there were a lot of out-of-state entities, Cresco, for example, Harvest, Moxie, and others that had local Pennsylvania partners, but they didn't have to have local Pennsylvania partners if they didn't want to. It's just in a state like Pennsylvania, it made a lot of sense to have someone who is from the community, who is able to work with the local politicians, understood the real estate, understood the Pennsylvania's geography, to partner with these companies.
Yep, we always say all cannabis is local, and so it's really important because those out-of-state, operators may have some real smarts and acumen in the industry, but if they don't have those local partners, I just don't think that they're going to be looked as friendly or as well upon. For the other types of cannabis cultivation licenses in Pennsylvania, after the micro grower, what's the next level up?
I believe it goes 100 to either 500 or 1,000, and then perhaps 5,000 as a cap for the tiered licenses. And I think that we're talking about capping, larger commercial grows at 100,000 square feet of canopy space.
Well, that's heads or tails. I mean, that's something that I always talk about in these types of canopy trade-off things, because what is the canopy space defined as? Does that include my clones? Does that include my mothers? Does that include my veg room? Or is the canopy space only the flowering canopy space?
Yeah.
And then the other one, go ahead. Let's see if you know the answer to that one then.
Right now, I think that when it comes to the medical side of it, we don't have cannabis space restrictions. The Department of Health has said, to alleviate product shortages or to try to bring prices down, expand your facilities. And Cresco is now up to 88,000 square feet. And I believe that what they consider canopy space is actual plants that are under lights and flowering. That would not include the clone or the mothering room.
Yeah, that's how we define it in Illinois, specifically for our craft grower license. But that's a 5,000 square foot canopy space. So if you divide that by 4, every plant has 4 square foot of space. You got like 1,250 plants. And that's our smallest license. And that's still a really big license, considering that the micro grower license in Pennsylvania's SB 350 bill is only 50 plants.
100 plants.
100 plants. All right. So that 100 plants is going to be easy for you to tend. However, the sales of it, and then you're going to very quickly outgrow it. And so what is the going rate at the medical dispensaries for a wholesale pound of cannabis flower in Pennsylvania?
We're not permitted to sell wholesale. The products all have to be packaged by the processor into individual retail sale units. So
how does that? So it leaves Cresco and it goes to Cresco's dispensary Rise, or wait, that's not. There's a sunny side. Rise is GTIs. Either way. So how does that booked for accounting purposes?
These are completely separate entities. Cresco's cultivation entity or license is separate from its dispensary license, and the Department of Health monitors wholesale prices and will not permit Cresco to favor itself. So the wholesale prices, I guess, because we have such a limited number, we've got 22 of 25 cultivation processing facilities online right now. But they have basically all agreed amongst themselves what their wholesale prices are going to be.
Yeah.
And, that results in fairly consistent dispensary prices across the board. Not very consumer friendly, but that's what we're dealing with in Pennsylvania because our legislature wanted a very closed marketplace.
It's about control. It's that cartel aspect. It was the same way in Illinois. They want that controlled marketplace where they can track every penny and you can gouge the patients.
Yep. And that's what we're seeing here. But at the very least, a Cresco product is going to be the same price at their dispensary as it's going to be at a Rise dispensary, as it's going to be at Terra Vita, as it's going to be at the Healing Center or Salivo or Maitri or wherever. And then if that individual dispensary wants to, offer incentives or sales, then it's up to their bottom line, but they're all getting it for the same wholesale price.
Right. So they don't regulate here in Washington. They have the weirdest rules. Like they did a food drive, and there was a pot shop giving away discounts for bringing in canned goods. And our regulating body said, nope, you can't do that. You're a bad boy for doing that. I mean, do they do stuff like that there, or is it just?
Yeah, it is very tightly regulated. So any sales or anything like that has to be run through the Department of Health to get approval. If the license holder wants to attend a table at a hemp fest or at a community program or at a county fair or anything like that, that has to get Department of Health approval. If they want to advertise on the radio or advertise on billboards, that requires Department of Health approval. Everything. The one exception is that a couple of our license holders, dispensaries, have set up separate educational centers. as a separate storefront, as a separate entity that doesn't require all the security and everything like that. So the educational center can sell T-shirts and can sell hats and can host events and can bring the public in, but you can't go into the dispensary unless you're actually a patient. And the dispensary cannot so much as give you a free T-shirt, but you can go next door to the educational center, and that's a little bit of a workaround. But not a lot of our dispensaries want to incur the cost of having two separate retail spaces. So,
well, there's the IRC 280E. That's actually one of the reasons why they set it up in that fashion, because I can't deduct the cost of advertising my cannabis product. But if I have an educational company that's selling my brand and I have a license agreement or something like that to sell all the accoutrement, sorry about that big French word, about all of the stuff, and, come down to the Cannabis Learning Center, and I can advertise that, and it's not subject to IRC 280E, that's an expense. And then maybe I'd have like a management contract or something between them, or just overlapping ownership. So sure, you're spending that money here, but it's better than it's being spent by that one, because then you'd be paying, twice the tax on it.
Makes sense.
That's not bad. Let's talk about in the cannabis dispensary. We already just did that. The cannabis cultivation law in Pennsylvania that's being proposed. Are there license caps? Like, can I just get all the licenses, or will I only be allowed to have like one license, or how does that work?
I believe it's going to be similar to our medical marijuana, where an entity can only apply for up to 5 dispensary licenses, for example. I think that a total of 5 licenses could be applied for by any individual entity under the medical. I can't specifically say whether or not SB 350 or HB 2050 addresses that, but I know that that's going to be something that will be in play, because we had a big issue here in Pennsylvania where Harvest, by setting up subsidiary companies, acquired too many licenses, and that led to litigation and concerns about monopoly and so on and so forth. So, I'm quite sure that the voices that will come to the table once we have this, if we can get this moving forward in our legislature, will be speaking to that, because we don't want to see small Pennsylvania businesses, small Pennsylvania entrepreneurs just completely cut out of this, like we did see with the medical program.
Totally.
Absolutely. And then is this going to be a competitive state? Is Pennsylvania cannabis applications going to be scored?
Yes, that our medical applications were scored. There were multiple scoring criteria, very similar to what Illinois did, very similar to Massachusetts, to other states. A wide variety of scoring criteria. All the way from your diversity plan, community engagement, security plan, your growing and nutrient plan, your diversion prevention, the whole 9 yards. The problem I think that we had with our medical program is that we put people in there that really didn't know a whole heck of a lot about scoring it, and we had some very widely disparate scores, like very similar entities with the exact same applications. One did very well, one did very poorly. It's like, what's the difference between these applications other than the subjectivity of the person scoring them? So hopefully we'll be able to learn from that and, basically do the exact same thing. And I think that that's how we're going to move forward, unless we have a situation where there are unlimited number of licenses, and then, hey, just show us that, you can comply with the regulatory aspects of Pennsylvania law, and here's your license. So we'll have to see how that plays out. If we've got a limited number of licenses like HB 2050, then scoring is going to be, all that more important. If it's, caveat emptor, put your money in it. If you succeed, good for you, then it might not be necessary.
That's fascinating. Illinois is actually trying to fix some of their problems that they have with that, because the scoring often leads to a lot of litigation. And so that litigation looks like it's going to be coming to Illinois most recently. And I was talking to Senator Steens, who is one of the chief drafters of the cannabis laws in Illinois, and Article 18 of the new Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act didn't quite get passed. It got passed by the Senate, but not necessarily by the House. So the litigation risk that I thought was going to be really, really limited because of the introduction of a lottery in the case of tied applicants doesn't look like it might be around this wave. So there could be some great litigation risk that comes when you have these types of subjective, like, It's pretty much the same application. This one gets a high score. This one doesn't get a high score. Why not? Okay, let's sue the state. Name them, serve discovery, and let's get to the bottom of this and see if we can settle for a license.
We've had some litigation in Pennsylvania as well. Not a lot because of, how few licenses were available. There was some litigation by one license applicant that, applied, and like part of their application was submitted in a timely fashion. Part of it was not submitted in a timely fashion. As I mentioned earlier, a license that was issued to Agromed has been revoked by the Department of Health because plants were disappearing from their facility. Nobody could explain what was going on. And, that license is under litigation right now. But I don't think that any of the litigation in Pennsylvania right now is going to change any existing license holders whatsoever.
So is your legislation in process now, or have they been on pause for the pandemic?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Is the legislation in process now, or has there been a pause for the pandemic?
Well, our legislature is still meeting. They're meeting remotely. But, the interesting thing about Pennsylvania is we have a balanced budget requirement. And because of the pandemic, Pennsylvania is looking at a budget deficit of $4 to $5 billion. And unless we get some relief from the federal government, which, we've got a blue governor and a red state, I don't know if we're going to get any relief from the federal government. We're going to have to do something. I don't think that anybody in Pennsylvania is prepared to cut $4 to $5 billion worth of services. And I don't think anyone in Pennsylvania is prepared to impose $4 to $5 billion worth of new taxes. So where do we look for new sources of revenue? And the cannabis legalization, as explained by our Auditor General, could generate up to $600 million in recurring revenue if we went, quote, full Colorado. Now that, of course, means, some pretty significant taxes, both excise taxes on the grower and the processors, retail taxes. And the concern is, do we, have taxes that are so high that the legal system or the legal industry simply doesn't, move forward, doesn't take off. But the potential is there. Add to that $600 million in annual recurring revenue is what I call the savings from cops, courts, and corrections.
Don't forget to also add back in. It's just not that tax revenue and that general revenue. First off, there's also sales tax, and then there's usually a true up on top of it. But don't forget the tens of thousands of jobs that are created. And so those jobs create even more of a benefit to it. And so those types of things are so important when addressing, because if you just look at it like from your budget on your government, it might be like, oh, it's 1%, it's 0.5%. You're like, whoa. That's not 0.5%. It's not 1. It's 1 or 0.5% right there on that bottom line every frickin' year. And that's just a small fraction of the story. You're not seeing the full picture of the sales tax at the retail level, at the local level. And then you're not seeing the income tax that's getting paid because these people have real jobs, and you're creating new companies that could grow and could create another product in the industry. So speaking about the tax issues for Pennsylvania cannabis legalization, what are the tax structures that are being thrown about for taxing legal Pennsylvania cannabis?
Yeah, I wish I had the infographic in front of me right now because the Auditor General laid it out. But it was essentially an excise tax at the grower processor level, an excise tax for the dispensary, and then a retail tax placed on retail sales. The number that he came up with was something like a 37% total taxes, but some of those were, the same type of business taxes that any other, entity would pay. And that's where he came up with an estimate of, I think, specifically $581 million in recurring revenue. Man. And, the jobs thing is something that, we can look at our medical program and say, we're going to be creating tens of thousands of jobs. Because even with our limited medical program, we've got 80 dispensaries online. Each one of those dispensaries probably employ at least 20 people. We've got 24 cultivation processing facilities that have been approved. 22 of them are generating product right now. Their total employee is probably between 50 and 80 employees. So we can look at our very limited medical system and say, hey, we've got 3,000 to 4,000 very good, high-paying jobs with benefits. with incentives, with retirement, with stock options.
Yeah, they're good jobs.
Yeah, these are good jobs.
Living wages.
$15 an hour for a wellness advisor, aka bud tender,
With
and
benefits.
for Pennsylvania, with benefits, that's pretty damn good.
Nice.
Now you're buying into those benefits. At least with my wife's company, Cresco, we're paying for the benefits. It's not 100% free, but these are good paying jobs. People are happy to have them. Benefits are available. Retirement is available. Expand that to a full adult use scenario in Pennsylvania, and I see us creating 50,000, maybe 100,000 jobs throughout the entire entire industry. Growing, processing, retail sales, and all the ancillary businesses that will support that.
Well, and have they brought up too? Your neighbors are, going recreational. Jersey's trying to get around it. Delaware, you're not far from Canada. There's going to be that and also the Northeast governors met talking about some sort of commerce. So you guys don't want to be behind the bar when that $1 billion door opens up.
No, we most certainly do not, and we've already seen that with gambling in Pennsylvania. Gambling was a big deal. People fought tooth and nail. It's a vice, it's bad, it's evil, it's that. And then they saw all the revenue going to West Virginia, all the revenue going to Ohio, all the revenue going to Atlantic City, New Jersey. And then finally that won the day. And now we have legal gambling in Pennsylvania, which generates a tremendous amount of money. But we also understand from gambling that unless we are very specific with the revenue that we're bringing in, it can just disappear into the general fund and not benefit communities that have been disproportionately affected by the war on drugs, by the war on cannabis, and so on and so forth.
Nice.
So are there any social equity aspects of these proposed legislations to legalize cannabis in Pennsylvania?
Yes, automatic expungement for any cannabis convictions that would be legal under the bill. If you were convicted of having a 300 plant grow, you might not qualify for that automatic expungement, but someone who's growing a few plants, someone who may have just hustled a very small amount of cannabis, those types of things. And of course, any cannabis related misdemeanor convictions will be automatically expunged under our bill.
Do those count as points? Do they have something like a social equity applicant that's contemplated under the new proposed Pennsylvania cannabis law?
It hasn't gotten that far yet, but I would say that that's something that would be included in both a community outreach plan and a diversity goals, which were some of the components required for our medical law. I am quite sure that if I'm, advising a client, or if I'm part of an application team and we know that restorative justice is out there, we're going to make sure that that's in the application. That one of the things that our community outreach goal is going to be is to make sure that that we can maximize the ability to get people to understand that they have these automatic expungement provisions that are available to them.
Nice.
That's fantastic. Well,
what are the qualifying conditions for medical?
We have 23 qualifying conditions. Chronic pain, of course, is the big one. I would say about 50% of our medical patients are chronic pain. Then the next two big ones are only two mental health diagnoses: PTSD, which was part of the original bill, and then anxiety was recently added. Moving past that, Crohn's, seizure disorder, severe epilepsy, cancer in remission, autism. I think we're the first state that had a list of qualifying conditions to include autism, sickle cell anemia, Huntington's disease, Tourette's.
Probably glaucoma, right?
Yeah, glaucoma. I'm missing some of the other big ones, but you get the.
It's a big list, and so from that, how many patients are in Pennsylvania?
We have over 250,000 registered patients right now.
Wow.
And the patient registry started in late 2017. We have a physician recommendation requirement. Physicians have to be registered with the program, and they have to recommend or certify patients. And we were very concerned, at least initially, that would amount to a bottleneck, that we wouldn't have enough physicians participating, that patients wouldn't be able to get to these physicians. And that's proven not to be the case. We have had very robust patient enrollment in the program. The problems that we have is, a lot of patients, have issues with the high price of medical cannabis. Our employee protections for patients are wishy-washy, to say the best, because we don't have a private cause of action within the statute. And Pennsylvania is a state that has a lot of veterans and a lot of sportsmen. And when patients learn that their Second Amendment rights may be in jeopardy because it remains Schedule I federally, a lot of patients will give up their cards because they don't want to lose their Second Amendment rights.
Yeah.
So these are issues that are confronting our patient community now that we're starting to move into a more mature marketplace.
That's fantastic, man.
Patrick, thank you so much for joining us today. Where can we go to find or follow you if we have any more questions about Pennsylvania?
CannabisLegalSolutions.com. That is my, .net. Jeez, I'm an idiot. CannabisLegalSolutions.net. PatrickNightingale.com. My personal email address, if anyone has questions about Pennsylvania's medical program or how to, potentially get involved with advocating for full legalization here, my email is pknlaw@mac.com. And also, I'd like to direct everybody to both PittsburghNormal.org and, of course, Normal.org, the nation's longest marijuana legalization advocacy group, of which I'm a proud member.
Nice.
Me too. I'm on the NLC. And then anybody who emails me at tom@collateralbase.com for this episode, I will send you a book. So please do send me an email at tom@collateralbase.com. Say, hey, I want a book, and give me your address, and I'll mail it out to you.
Hey, guys, thank you very much. It was an absolute pleasure to spend that Sunday afternoon with you.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much,
Patrick.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Make sure you like and subscribe to keep up with all cannabis legalization news. We will see you on Wednesday.
No, take care.